Want to welcome you. Hopefully you'll be part of an interactive discussion with us today. We do have some questions about why the heck Nordic countries punch so far above their weight. And welcome. And if we advance one more, I think the starting point on this, and this is our, I think, 7th stop on our global tour. We've done a number of different regions, but I love the fact on this one, Andrea, that we have 5 countries. It's like a very targeted set of geographies. So it leads to smaller levels of discussion. And they're just not a small group of 5 countries, but they punch way above their weight on innovation. As you can see here, at worst, 28th place is where the countries of the Nordics rank. So I know you've done a lot of work in the Nordics, Andrea. Any comments off the top in terms of just the level of impressiveness and reverence we have for the region?
Yeah, I'm super excited. As you know, my home away from home is the Nordic region. And for some reason, it's a place I started going, I guess, in 2011 and have been working there and as you know, future-proofing there for many years. Other than the fact that I have the world's worst accent in every single Nordic language and only learned to pronounce first names after about a year properly, it's become, as I said, home away from home. I feel like there's a couple things that always impress me. One is just their view of capitalism. I come from the United States, live in Silicon Valley, and there was an initial thought of, let's bring innovation to the Nordics. That was my first thought. And it was really clear that the global view of capitalism was not necessarily universal. So I think that some of the things that I've learned from working in the Nordics so long is that the notion of having social impact, sustainability, there's so many areas where in wind power, where we've worked, obviously, alternative energy, there's so many places where the mindset and the zeitgeist and the hygge and all the other kinds of parts of the culture really are important when you think about business and growth.
I agree. We're probably going to tumble through some of those today. I know we're doing almost a book tour in reverse. We had a good chat with a number of other authors the other day, and how it's almost a trend now that we kind of do the tour before we do the launch. And so this kind of happened out of happenstance. We were about to launch and then COVID happened. And so we've kind of delayed, got preoccupied with our other ventures. And now it almost happens in reverse, where we've done our global tour and now we're leading to a book that's about to culminate soon. So, so you'll see the fruits of that effort today. Our mission across everything we get involved in, including some things that aren't book related today. How do we get people, regions, companies to bigger, better, bolder future and simpler futures? And so these are our credentials. And in a weird world, Andrea, the literary world, back in the days, McGraw-Hill brought 2 people together, and it's kind of like a virtuous circle where we had a book bring us together. We then started to do some things, and then we have a book that's brought us together again. And so just want to thank every member of our community. We really have been benefited by, I want to say I've probably had 300 discussions at least in this year alone with our community. It starts on the inside. We call these people 66 champions. Then we have a network, and then we have the community at large. Hopefully we can bring some of you closer up to the middle of the circle after today's presentation. And it looks like there's one little hangover there in terms of stuff. This is actually a Nordic thing. Our Middle Eastern perspective was in our last webinar, but we want to talk to you a little bit about our future beyond innovation. It truly is a movement. It's not just a venture or a book. We want to get your perspective, and we want to look at global launches and ways to participate. And we have about 7 of them. So Andrea, 27 million people, 27 million people. I knew it was a small number. I mean, I'm from Canada, and so, I think of Canada as being small in comparison to the US, but we have about 38 million people. And so this entire region has 27 million people. And yet time and time again, when you look at innovation rankings and where great startups are coming out of, and where some of the best global Fortune 500 companies exist, they come out of this region. It's kind of I'm almost marveling as I am questioning what is the special sauce here, right?
Well, I have some thoughts about it personally. We'll look at, why Sweden beats other countries in just a second. But in the meantime, by the way, you'll have to be running the polls because I can't run them from my configuration. So just giving you forewarning here. But I think that one of the things that's interesting is this idea of leverage. That when and 27 million people is a lot of people to in some definitions. It's not a lot of people when you look at huge geographies, but the mindset of knowing that leverage is so important, the mindset of understanding that resources matter and that being very mindful of how you use resources, and also understanding the importance of relationships, that when you have to be when you're a group of people that really depends on being good partners, and as you and I say, good bedfellows, people who are trustworthy, people who have ethics, people who put value ahead of greed. It's really, and also social responsibility. I mean, I remember working in Denmark, and there was a really, really busy executive that we were working with in a wind company. And at 4 o'clock, no matter what, he went off to work at the football field, the soccer field, because that was part of his community responsibility. Didn't matter how busy he was. It was like, that's part of the commitment that I've made to the people that I live with, and the ability to build a community where everyone has a mindset around that is very different from what I had experienced where I live in the United States. So Sean, what do you think about why does Sweden beat other countries?
Well, I mean, we're still in 5 headlines here, so I just thought we'd give a random sample of some of the top news or organizations around the world beating the drum about how great Nordic was. This was Sweden's. Maybe we'll tumble through the next 4 just so they're all complete. Voted best country in the world for quality of life, which, I think has at least a tangential effect to innovation. So that's Norway. Finland, happiness. Certainly if you ask a number of people, GDP might have to be reconstituted as, gross happiness index in terms of stuff. And if that was the case, Finland would be high. Denmark, quality of life, once again. It seems like on every single social progress, economic, and innovation measure, most of the countries of the Nords definitely play well. And then having been to Iceland right before COVID, I can testify to this one as well. Most fascinating country in the world. And it's interesting, you walk into a supermarket or any type of shop in Iceland, and it's like you're not seeing Coca-Cola. You're seeing completely different things that Iceland has produced. One of my favorite things as a recovering marketer was to walk through the gift shop in the airport in Iceland. And most gift shops are pretty touristy and trashy. Iceland has this incredible array of distillers and candle makers and vestment makers and sweater makers and carpet. Like, it's just everything that I've never seen in my life in an airport. And so once again, good testament for the region. So we have a poll. We'll do the poll. We won't put too much stock in the results, just given who's here today. But we're curious, as we look at it, is it the climate? Is it the design and sensibility? Is it, the levels of government support or education, or you've had to, because you've had to export your ideas forever in history? Does it have something to do with open and flat hierarchies and the fact that most good open innovation and good democratic experiments come out of the Nords? Is it because you're resource rich and you can lean on those in times of non-innovativeness? Is it some of your social equity? Tends to be most of the things on gender scales and other things suggest that the Nordic regions are, as close to balanced as possible. Or perhaps is it technology and R&D, which constantly the region ranks highly. So I'm gonna launch this poll. We'll get your thoughts. I'm not too sure if that hits any of your sensibilities, Andrea, in terms of
well, I think one of the things that I've noticed when I look at this, not to prejudice the people who are responding to the poll, but there is, to me, we always talk about the fact that innovation comes from mindset first. And it's really interesting to me because people say, well, then how do you develop mindset? How do you form mindset? How do you value that? And I think that, the combination of feeling a sense of social responsibility and the government being involved and understanding that people have to pull together, and also, the fact that people speak multiple languages and do quite a bit of travel, I think that all of those have to do with why people think ahead and think more globally and are more interested in people other than themselves, which I think is a mindset that definitely fuels innovation.
Well, we'll let this go for a few more seconds, but it seems like, at least on the straw poll of people that we have, certainly social equity is far and away leading the races here. So I would, I'll close this one, and certainly I wouldn't take our quantitativeness to the bank, but certainly this is pretty good evidence that there's something going on in terms of social equity, which, you know, I'm going to ladder to. You know, all opinions matter, regardless of who you are. And certainly if you're, obviously, I'm looking at this from an outsider's perspective. If you have thoughts around social equity or any other piece that drives this type of innovation, just put stuff in the chat. We'll save the chat and hopefully create something out of this as a session. So, Andrea?
No, I don't have any comments on it. And once again, when it's time, you'll have to do the stop share because I can't deal with the polls right now. I think that it's interesting, a combination of social equity and education, because it really does have to do with this thing we've been talking about. How do you get a mindset? And I think a lot of it has tried to be exported. You know, when we think of Hygge and some of the other mindsets that have made it to the bestseller list, at least. But I also think that in this particular moment, especially post-COVID, when health and humanity has come to the forefront in every single business around the world, the Nordics are the people that we look to. You know, how can we basically acquire the mindset, the Nordic mindset around the world, to look at every single industry. You know, I work a lot in fintech. The Nordic region leads in fintech. And look at some of the other ecosystems that are forming in Sweden and some of the corporate leadership in the region. And it just seems like we're looking at toward the Nordics right now, as I said, especially post-COVID. Like, is it possible to divorce the mental health, the psychological health, the social responsibility, and the safety and health of citizens from corporate growth? And I think the world's saying, no, it's not possible to divorce those.
Yeah, it certainly positions the region well for the future, because I think we're catching up to where the Nordics are. Maybe they'll vault ahead again. But so this is as much about us getting a real good understanding of what's going on in the region, hopefully interacting, but also telling you a little bit about some of the stuff that we're up to. We have a book that's coming out, as mentioned. I think Charlene Lee and Mitch Joel were talking about, you know, this reverse field in terms of let's create the movement before we actually get the book. And you know, I can tell you that some of these global sessions that we've had have really influenced what goes into the book as well. So that's a kind of a neat reversal of fortune. You know, June 1st, we want to launch the book. We have June 23rd, where we're recognizing the best in the world. And for people that have chimed into us today, we really, really want to have a judge and jury representing the Nordic region as well, because they're just, in researching for today's presentation, there was a ton, I mean a ton of great niche companies that I had never heard of that are coming out of the region. So as much as we know the H&Ms and the Ikeas and, you know, Electrolux and Ericsson and Nokia, and we can go on and on and on. Certainly there's a ton of other ones that we haven't heard yet that we want to surface in the awards. And then finally, we have just finished one of our executive training cohorts, or at least we're in the second half of them. So we've brought together some of the most impressive innovators from around the world into a 90-day training session. We're going to have our second cohort, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's going to be launching September 17th. And then as well,
I can talk a little bit about the salons. One of the things that we do is we have these future-proofing salons, and Sean was talking about building a movement, and we really believe in the fact that it takes a huge village, and we don't have to convince people in the Nordics around that. So what we're doing is having these salons where we have content that is of interest, timely interest. You know, we do a lot of work in these webinars, we do work on Clubhouse, but what we've heard is that people really want to dive deeper and have conversations around the things that are keeping us up at night. And so these future-proofing salons start in April. we're also starting to do these global ambassadors. And so we had a kickoff meeting in February, and this is really about community. This is really about the fact that that we want to learn as much as we like to profess. And so, as Sean said, we've been in learning mode. You know, one of the things we talk about and you're about to hear about is see, learn, decide, commit. And we've learned so much about learning, and hopefully you'll be interested in joining us as a global ambassador. And part of that also is this notion of foresight, because if we thought that we had the best ideas in the room, we do not think that. We believe that taking the pulse and being ahead of early signs of emerging trends is the way that we all get smarter. And so we like to put people in this state of perpetual refresh, you know, like how can we stay relevant constantly? So this is these future-proofing foresight ventures, you know, where we look at the emerging trends, there's customer zeitgeist, AI and humans, future of work, Digiball, sports, corporate innovation playbook. These are things that Sean has been leading for almost a decade. Sean, is that right?
Probably more, Andrea. Yeah, I hate to admit it.
Despite your youthful appearance. And so the idea of longitudinal insight into some of the most pressing issues facing innovation and allowing us to move forward faster. So once again, we do these annual rollouts and look at the way that foresight can be turned into meaning and action.
So that's the little bit of the tease. I think we'll give you a specific tout at the end of this presentation where we're inviting you into a number of those different ventures. This has got a lot of traction for us this year, and it's not that we want to dump on any of the previous innovation schools, but it is interesting how you, as you go over a period of time, you actually you know, as a reaction to the environment around them, there's been various schools, and we've listed 10 of the main ones here that have happened over the last, let's call it 60, 70 years. We don't think they're bad. We think they existed for a previous time. Some of them are still useful, but they were never known to be kind of an all things fit under this roof. And we think with Futureproofing Next, it is an approach that we think makes sense for the 2020s, and B, it covers off the full gamut of what innovators face in what we call see, learn, decide, commit, which we'll talk about in a minute. So before we get into any of the future of and the book and other things, we thought, you know what, we might want to just engage our audience that's online with, you know, we talked about how great and how complimentary we were of, you know, some of the things that have come out of the region. If we look at it from the next 5 years, what's most important to get right for any of the 5 countries for the Nordic region? And you can answer this from a corporate innovation standpoint or a country innovation standpoint or a public innovation. Your call here, but we'd love to hear some thoughts in chat in terms of just what is the real mission of Nordic innovation over the next 5 years. I'll be intrigued in the thoughts. Andrea?
Well, I think that the challenges when we were talking about this lead to this whole thought of why we wrote the book, because we've been listening to people talk about what it is that's keeping us up at night. We've got all these, as Sean was saying, we've got all these tools. You know, it's not that we don't have tools. We have design thinking, we have agile, we have lean startup, we have SWOT analysis, which I just railed against yesterday in its clubhouse session. But you know, despite all of that, we need to talk as people and say, wait a minute, things are changing. It's changing faster than ever. And you and I have looked at some feedback and some surveys on what matters to people is purpose, and what challenges people is speed. And so how do we figure this all out together? And so that's where I think, you know, this tees up why the book. And Sean, you know, you might want to kind of put a ribbon around the thoughts of the challenges that we've got, the timing for what's happening this particular year and what these wake-up calls have been, especially post-COVID, but also the fact that innovation tools that were designed for other eras are just not cutting it this year.
I think so. I think I mean, we've even built a guild around the whole, let's try to make sense of the pandemic. And so we've built about a global universe of about 1,200 people that think about this question a lot. But certainly the pandemic has loosened a ton of constraints in terms of what people are looking at. We've seen up close, maybe we've just had the extra time, but we've seen up close the technology side of things advancing. You know, remark about Elon Musk hosting Saturday Night Live up here in North America, and just how mainstreaming kind of things like Tesla and technology, you know, Bill and Melinda Gates splitting up, probably another one where it's like, oh my Lord, did we ever talk about tech CEOs in the 1960s or the 1980s? Probably not. And then finally, I think this is where the Nordic region has had it right for a while. You know, we need to become more than just bottom line driven from a profit standpoint. And, you know, how do we put purpose, planet, people just as important on that agenda? And I think stakeholder capitalism is suggesting that, you know, people should be looking at that very seriously. So why don't we go, and I've slimmed this up a little bit. We've got 10 reasons. Just I thought, you know, any good argument probably only needs 3 strong reasons or 7 smallish reasons, but we've got 10. So we do have a book. It looks pretty. Every one of the pages has kind of a left side designed, right side, let's discuss what just happened. And unlike other books, like it's so crazy. I think ever since the Gutenberg press, I don't know if the physical book has changed that much, Andrea. And so, you know, we want to have different videos and interactions and dive deeper as you jump online. So nearly every one of our pages has a call to action to jump online and discover something more. And so, you know, it's a bit of a manifesto, it's a bit of a field guide, it's a playbook and a resource bank all in one. Usually with some books, you only get one different facet, but we are dealing with practitioners and they probably have all 4 of these questions on their minds. And so if you go to 21 Reasons Why, you'll get a semblance of some of those. And it's also a reflection of kind of we're living in COVID world and a number of things, not the least of which, you know, how do we reimagine ourselves on the other side of COVID have really come to the fore. But speed is one of the biggest things that are driving our need to change the way we innovate. Andrea?
And I'll jump in with something really quick. I teach at the Business Institute Denmark in Aalborg and have been for years. And that is a shameless plug for a great group that has really advanced innovation. But one of the things that I think is great about what they do is they do something called a book skim, which is a short version of a book, knowing that busy executives and teams that are trying to lead change usually don't have time to read about it. So that's the other reason that we wrote this book. It's like, who reads books back, you know, end to end anymore, you know, in a physical form? And so we've taken the most, you know, it's kind of the 80-20 rule, the highest and best use of your time, the form factor that you can either skim or do a deep dive into. You know, it's like a T shape. It's broad and it's deep. And it's for people to use as practitioners. I think that one of the things that's been so important to us is, how can you write books anymore when the world is like completely changing, exploding, becoming harder and harder to decipher, harder and harder to lead a business in these times? And so, you know, we designed the book itself, even as a form factor, to be either skimmed, or we like to say, you know, it should be kind of dog-eared on your desk. It should be like, speaking of the Gutenberg Bible, it should be the Bible on your desk. Like you can just reach for it and pick something out that's applicable and helpful and useful and practical pretty much any day.
And I do want to recognize Katarina. She served up what is the challenge for Nordic innovators. She mentioned, you know, how do you keep the region attractive to keep people and companies here? And as a Canadian, I can testify to that. How do they just not escape to some of the larger population centers elsewhere? She also mentioned, you know, now that the world has learned how to collaborate virtually, how that maybe becomes a bigger risk. And speed and finding our niche, which, you know, I will give, certainly if I look at Sweden and some of the choices they've made, my sense is Sweden doesn't try to choose to be everything. They are world leaders in cancer treatment. They're world leaders in gaming. And unfortunately, with some other countries that are maybe in that mid-tier status, they try to focus on everything and end up not doing too much of it too well. So this slide just mentions the kind of 30 different schools of thought that have driven what has turned into our book. People think innovation, they think, oh my Lord, okay, so it's agile, it's lean, maybe it's a bit of design thinking. No, there is such a larger horizon in universe if you only open up your eyes. You know, what is the people side of innovation, which tends to be more the green kind of stuff that we have here? You know, we're doing a Clubhouse session at 4 p.m. Eastern time today. I know it's late from a Nordic standpoint, but the whole idea of business models and ecosystems and how this new language of innovation is happening. And then, as Andrea always says, you know, we have to get to escape velocity, and how do we scale some of this innovation to actually make a dent in corporate universes? And, you know, I think too often innovators forget about the market facing side of it. And the ideas actually do have to succeed eventually, right? So,
and I'll talk a little bit about talent because I think, Sean, to your point, it used to be that we knew how to pick talent. And I think that, to Katrina's point, there's quality of life is the reason. I mean, the reason that I've been working in the Nordics for so long is, you know, bicycles, people who have quality of life. Where do you want to raise children? Where do you want to have families? Where do you want to have connection? You know, the best food scene I've seen in a long time globally. And so to us, one of the reasons that people want to live anywhere, because now that in COVID, we know we can work from anywhere. So literally we can live anywhere, you know, sitting really close to Salesforce headquarters, which is this humongous building in San Francisco that has been completely empty. You know, it used to be that the reason that you could draw talent was because of proximity to headquarters. And that is completely irrelevant right now, might be for a long time. And so when we look at the quality of life in places like the Nordics and the attractiveness of the mindset, the philosophy, the social responsibility, we look at being able to get talent, you know, that wants to live near a cool coffee place, have a great quality of life, have beautiful hiking, have outdoor lifestyle, have, you know, bicycles to work. I mean, all of those things are really important to a growing population now that doesn't need to be, you know, a kilometer away from the biggest building in the city. So we look at that. And for people listening to this, we're looking at 6 scopes of future-proofing intelligence. And we look at people, you know, like, what is it that we need to be good at? We used to have to be good at maybe, you know, calculation, but then computers came in and took that away from us, you know, or being really good at, you know, business processes. But, you know, a lot of people, that's now commonplace, you know, everybody, it's shared. But the distinguishing skills have to do with our ability now to look through 6 scopes. And we cover this in the book, the ability to have a stethoscope, you know, talent and culture, the ability to really understand the heart of customer empathy, and the ability to have a microscope where you look at strategy very, very technically, and you're able to have skills with regards to diagnostics and insights that are based on technical knowledge and prowess. Gyroscope intelligence, where operations and technology get a little bit of love. We think there's a bunch of value in being able to think very innovatively through what we call venture technologist mindset, you know, the way of combining technology plus business savvy plus people in a cool operational construct. And then being able to look across industries. We pride ourselves in being experts in the customer, the marketplace, emerging trends in both of those, as well as cross industry. We know that the most likely place for us to have a competitor in the next 6 months is from someplace we're not even paying attention to. You know, a field that's going to come out, a startup that's going to emerge. So how do you have a periscope to really look around, not just in silos? And then the last part is this idea of futures and trends. And Sean and I talk about this because we have it in common, you know, the ability to see early signs of something and say, you know, that's kind of tending toward this new potential. And Sean and I don't view ourselves as futurists in a strict sense, you know, that we can predict it, but we are definitely trying to equip everyone in this view of future proofing, which is responsiveness to emerging changes and shifts. And that's what we think is the telescope in terms of the intelligence and the skills.
And I know we're halfway through this. So just to, once again, another entreaty to have any of you that have joined us, just type in chat. What do you think the biggest challenge and opportunity for the region? I enjoyed reading Katerina's stuff. We'll serve it up to the full group and our recorded audience as well. We have new frameworks in this book, and we don't treat innovators like they're just starting out. I mean, you know, we've had good 30 or 40 years of literature about innovation. We are standing on the shoulders of some of those people and taking those further. This is our ontology in terms of just how innovation, what types of innovation and what levels of innovation are at play. Usually you'll get something like an ambidextrous organization, which pretty much says there's 2 different types of innovation. There's the stuff that keeps the trains running on time. There's the stuff in the future. No. We say, look, if you're going to be in this for good, you better understand the nuance and some of the layers to it. And here are the 6 different types of innovation, tumbled out 4 ways, and each one has a different level of ambition and aspiration on them. So we don't like horizons, but we do have different kind of ranges, I guess. But as we've seen it with COVID, you immediately can change your business overnight. And so we hate models that really hamstrung themselves to time the market. We have a range of different canvases. This is everything that you ever wanted. It's almost like a cookbook for innovation. Everything that you always wanted for innovation and were afraid to ask, we've included in our book, and some of the ancillary tools online. And so generally canvases are tools that bring everything together and hopefully serve things up for yourself and your management, your teams. And then our tools are things that hopefully unlock value, unlock new ways at getting at things. And so we have 54 of them in our book. So
what I love about this is we talked earlier about the Nordic mindset. There's also this future-proofing mindset. So we think it's like a mindset and a skill set, a mindset and a skill set. And I love what Sean was saying about a cookbook, because you can have this vision that you would love to have a meal, in a new way. And so the first part of it is, that you have this thought that you want to provide, a new approach. And certainly there's some great models for that in the Nordics. I love, I will pronounce this incorrectly, Østerdønne, one of these models that has a food delivery service very early in that game, very a fantastic group of founders, and they've gone on and on to have this really innovative model. But it started with a mindset that healthy food should be delivered with ingredients to the door. Women were working, and men were working, and families wanted great food and didn't want to go to fast food. And so how do you have a mindset for healthy food that's available to a lot of people? Well, then you need a skill set. What would that model be? What would the pricing be? How would the logistics work? Do we need a farm? Yes, they did have, now they have a farm, they have education. It's a whole generation of people with this mindset that they're training. So you have a mindset and then you have a skill set. And so the book has both. It helps you get into the mindset of being brave and looking at the future with a lot of optimism and rational optimism. But it also has an idea of, okay, well, now that I know what I want to cook, where's page 73 where I can get that great recipe? So all these tools are not designed to overwhelm. They're actually designed to be a great opportunity. You go to the shelf, you open up the book to whatever page you need, and then you've got it, as we say, dog-eared on your desk the rest of the year as well.
I want to profile one of my dear friends, Evelina Skalstad. She is in a rural village, really high north in Sweden. I want to say really high north, but I'm from Canada. I mean, we're both high north, I suppose. And it's a unique, innovative, almost sub-world that Evelina has created. It's a village of about 800 people that has 60 small companies. 7 of them are completely crowd-based and open innovation driven, and they all reinvest for common good. And so, I don't know, my hope is this is an exportable concept, but certainly Evelina has been able to be bold about creating something that is, in my mind, almost completely new to the world. And it certainly caught people and people have noticed. And her thought in terms of what the biggest challenge of the region is we need people with courage, and equal teamwork and trust, which is a really good sentiment. If I have a converted sign, let me straighten it right now, Evelina, because I like what you're dishing up. We love the future of. Certainly, we spend a good amount of time looking at it from an industry standpoint and looking at it from a change function standpoint. So one of our big research projects this year is future of work mastery. As well, from time to time, probably 1 in every 4 of our episodes is focused of our webcast episodes is focused on the future of something. So yes, we like to get out in front of the future, but we know it's not preordained. You can change it.
And I'll just jump in here. Once again, these are shameless plugs for our Nordic connections, but we've been working with Copenhagen FinTech, and they had this really great vision, partly fueled by the Startup Genome Project. They did a study, what can we be great in, a few years ago, and decided that FinTech was one of the things that they could be world-class in. And so over the course of a few years, and we've been lucky, I serve on the board, and Sean and I have worked with Thomas Krogh Jensen and others from the Copenhagen FinTech. They just decided to put a stake in the ground and be global leaders, which I thought was great. Mindset first, skills second, mindset first, skills second. So in a sense, they future-proofed. They won't say that they read the book yet, but they inspired us for sure. And the future of FinTech, you take that center of gravity and you put it right in the Nordic region, and suddenly the world started to converge around, attention focused on that region. And now, they have a huge ecosystem. We have friends from that ecosystem at Saxo Bank, big innovators. And, it's amazing how the future of finance, I think now you could put a big stake in the ground and say that the Nordics have a huge role in the whole global future of finance as well.
Top line, the next three, we have a ton of case studies, but I would mention to anybody, and I know there's a lot of corporate innovators on our call today, we really want to have a continuous grouping of cases from around the world. So if you have an interesting company, and I know, I think there was a few people from Norway and Denmark that said they were going to join us today, we really want to hear from you. We'd love to profile your companies. These are just 4 that end up being in the book. We also cover completely different areas. This afternoon on Clubhouse, we're covering stuff on business models that candidly nobody has covered in the world. We also spent a good amount of time in terms of how to scale innovation. This is one of our readouts. We tried to figure out what could we add to the craft and the literature of innovation without being completely duplicative.
And then I'll jump in. I'll jump in with the Goldilocks effect. It's one of my favorites because once again, Sean was talking about the sort of binary, it's either A or B. And we love futurists, but, a lot of times the outlook is, science fiction. You never get to that future. That's why we hate Horizons, because nobody ever funds Horizon 3. I know that that's a bit extreme, but that, we like to have the Goldilocks sweet spot, and it's not too extremely to the right, not too extremely to the left. It's sort of just right. So what's the just right place for an outlook? It's not today, and it's not 1,000 years from today. What's the right place? And we believe that we've hit it at exactly the sweet spot to future proof. What's the right blend and place to land in terms of standard solutions or custom solutions? You can go crazy with what if, but you can also go too conservative with we're just going to do it the way we always did. Left and right brain. A lot of people think that it's all about we joke because at Lego, they were joking about, they would bring in the creatives from Milan, Italy, with their berets and their really cool fonts to, come up with the next innovative idea. Meanwhile, the operations people wouldn't get any love. And that changed. And that sort of changed Lego's path from innovation being basically having some troubles with the way that they had approached innovation a few years ago to now, of course, getting it completely right and being market leaders once again. So what's the right amount of kind of creativity versus standard solution? And how much new do you need and how much operational stuff do you need? Same thing, how much massive change you need after COVID. It's we have to change everything. Then you realize that actually lots of things can stay the way they were, maybe just tweak them. So what's the right blend if you're a leader, if you're a team? And then front end and back end of innovation, it used to be a few years ago with design thinking that the front end got all the love. How many sticky notes can we put? Now it's Miro. How much can we put on a Miro board? And now instead it's sort of wait a minute, if that can't scale, it might not fly. So there you go. That's our thought about the Goldilocks sweet spot.
And I just, once again, just going to profile something that Evelina said in the chat. Stop working in silos and have applications that are so square. Innovation is not a square, which we love. I think we should do innovation by shapes one day and just what is innovation? It's at least hexagonal, if not more, right? But it's a challenge, and certainly it's not a challenge, apparently. And I always get the pronunciation wrong. I'll say it. The village that I profiled earlier was, I believe, Vuolarum. You'll tell me if it's wrong there, Evelina, but I think she's getting back to me from earlier, and the fact that I said, I don't know if it's exportable anywhere in the world or whatever, and she's saying, yes, it can be done anywhere. So just some great thoughts from Evelina. So we're going to have the book. It's going to come out in June. It's going to be hand-holdable, so you can put it on a bookshelf, yes, or you could have it sitting on the corner of your desk, all dog-eared and like with different yellow Post-it notes, which kind of, I guess, is our end ambition. And so we'll also have a supporting online global community and library of digital assets to go along with it. So it is taking a book and giving it a 2021 twist.
I also want to give a shout out to someone, speaking of communities. I don't know if people know Danae Ringelman, but she was actually the person who shamed me into, I was doing field testing for the first book at University of California, Berkeley. And she came up with this great idea and said she wanted to pick my brain. And she described it. It was like this crowdsourced way to fund films. And she was calling it Indiegogo. And she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "That's a stupid name." So years later, she founded Indiegogo, became hugely successful, and now she moved to Norway. And one of the things she does now is she co-owns something called Huso Lodge, Huso, which is same thing. It's a boutique hotel, but it's really a mindset. It's a retreat center with a new mindset that brings the Nordic culture to corporate retreats, and it's based on health and wellness and a lot of the zeitgeist of the Nordic region. And so once again, we look to that region. You know, she moved from Silicon Valley to Norway to establish a mindset and a lifestyle that is going to hopefully spread the Nordic mindset to corporations and leaders for many years to come. So shout out to Danae. So the question is, Sean, do you want to explain how does
yeah, in the last quarter of the session we have together, this is maybe something we haven't served it up as a survey necessarily, but as you're looking at this, we've thought about, well, how does Nordic's business get more innovative? It could be regulatory or education or infrastructural or leadership. Just throw messages in the chat in terms of just as we pivot forward to the next 4 years, 2025 maybe as a goal in mind. What would be the one thing that we could unblock that's tangible that just throw into the chat, and then we'll start to talk about the 7 or 8 things that we really want to have happen coming out of our book and its impending launch. So here's what it looks like. And, we are introducing new lexicon to the language of innovation. It's future-proofing, not innovation, innovation, not R&D, nexting, not inventing, and perpetual refresh, not closed and locked thinking. So let's talk about the 7 or 8 things that we want to proffer up. And sorry, just as a broad scale gamut on our approach, there are 4 words that probably, if it wasn't the title of our book, the second thing that you'll probably take away from our book is the 4 things that every innovator needs to pass through: see, learn, decide, commit. And
to that, I'll say, we have tattoos. They're temporary tattoos, but they are going to be available. Everybody's been requesting them: see, learn, decide, commit, or SLDC. There'll probably be a couple songs that will come out based on the initials. But what's interesting to us is that it didn't start off with commit. It's see, learn, decide, see, learn, decide. Everybody knows how to, to think about business that way. And it was really interesting that the more Sean and I worked together, the more we realized that this is the era of commitment, that the ability for someone to wake up and go, it's my job to do this, or this must happen, or society must change, or we can really bring fantastic new possibilities to the market and do it through business. And so the idea of being so committed to commitment is a new idea, quite frankly. It used to be about ideas, even design thinking, ideas, and empathy was still around, what customers want to buy, what is missing. But the notion of really instilling commitment into leaders, so see, learn, decide, commit, is very, very important to us. And we've got a whole, 8-hour drill down on talking about that if you want to talk about it more.
Well, it's interesting. And the drill down in a lot of other places happens with kind of what we would call see, learn, which is still important, but more than 50% of corporate innovators' issues, at least based on some research that we did, end up being in the latter stages of their projects. This is just our model broken down a little bit further. We think there are the yin and yang of each one of these steps for innovators that they need to pass through. And then if you want the engineer version of, wow, there's a complete dashboard of tools and canvases, and they methodically work all together, and it's almost like an operating system. So it's like our FN-DOS, I suppose, of how to do this. You can look at one of these things and go, look, I don't need the whole thing, but I really need to know how to do customer stakeholder potential well. Great, I'm going to grab that from the shelf. Or you can start afresh and go, look, this is a really fresh way of looking at how to do innovation differently that is based on 13,000 teams having used a lot of the same processes and tools here as well.
And we want to give another shout out to someone in the Nordics. We have an article that's coming out in the May issue, I guess this month's issue of Tiden Tendenser, Time and Tendencies, Trends. And we love that journal. It's a trend journal, and we are being featured. The book is being featured in the May journal, which is all about innovation post-COVID. So thank you to the journal for including Futureproofing Next as part of the new literature for how to get to innovation in the new world.
And we might skip this for the sake of getting to the end of our presentation and surfacing some opportunities here, but certainly we think our See, Learn, Decide, Commit maps well to any government, countrywide level, corporate level, or social innovation level type of innovation. So 7 ways to participate with us, because we really are about collaboration and bringing people into our world. Let's go through them quickly here, Andrea. We'll maybe alternate. The exciting part about this is we've done so many regions in the world. We're coming up to a point in time after August where we do, well, I guess July is Germany, and then late July is Mexico and Central America. After that, we then pivot to different types of C-suite roles. So if you want to do future proofing well in the C-suite, you've got a second chance as somebody in the Nordic region. And so this one, Andrea, do you want to speak to?
Yeah, we're completely obsessed with practitioners. You know, we in our first books, to be fair, in our first books, I don't know about you, but I wanted to be a thought leader. I wanted to be viewed as a revolutionary. I wanted to be viewed as, you know, just someone who could develop a theory well. And it was very important to be able to do that. You know, this next book, Sean and I are at a different stage in our careers, and we're really about making sure that the mindset is shared universally. And so we are really about spreading the word and getting the tools into the hands of people. We know we do it best by doing. And so we started something called Futureproofing You, which is the coolest people. I mean, hopefully you'll join it as well. The coolest people from all over the world gather together every Friday. And we have basically hands-on. So we do some learning by doing, some learning by listening, some learning by breakouts. We have all kinds of creative ways. People have been using Miro and mural boards and brainstorming and working as teams. And it's from every single industry, you know, fintech and future of mobility and medical, and, you know, all of the different leaders take part in a course. It's 90-day sprint. You get into the best shape you possibly can with hands-on exposure. And then the 1 week you get together as a whole group. Week 2, you have this coaching in teams. When it's been such interesting conversations, one after the next. And then the 3rd week, there's an assignment that we help you through that's completely customized to your situation. So it's highly customized, plus some theory, lots of tools, a lot of laughing, a lot of challenging, a lot of conversation. It's the way we all wanted to learn, but it just didn't exist yet. And so we've done it virtually, plus we are able to do it in person as well.
And I think data rights for the Nordic region, you know, it's set up to exist early morning in Pacific Coast time. So there's still a chance if you want to do stuff after work hours, you know, that would be the core live piece. And obviously we're a digital culture and we deliver it digitally and asynchronously. So you can join those at any point in time. We have a webcast that we do every month. So as much as we do things on Clubhouse and a whole bunch of other things, this is our real figurehead thing that once a month we dive deep on a subject. The one that's coming up is Perpetual Refresh, where, you know, we look at, you know, life and the journey of being an innovator is constantly refreshing your skills and learning new stuff. And so it's not only what are some of those skills, but it's also the process of never stopping and arresting your development. And so that should be interesting. And this one in particular, I have a shout out to the Nordic region because I definitely want to get nominations and people on our jury from the Nordic region. We started our nomination process April 20th. We're going to run the awards on June 23rd. And it's set up in a very unique way. First of all, I think on the next slide, we have the 20 different categories that we're looking at. And so, you know, nobody does this. You know, the Nobels have the Peace Prize, and, you know, the Emmys have like the TV prizes. But if you look at great innovators around the world, yes, they do maybe a sliver here, sliver there, maybe like who's produced the best website or whatever, but nobody does this. And we're doing it in a way where we want to recognize both the people that you might expect to be on this list of people and some of the reasons why, and the total new discoveries, which I'm sure would come out of your region. So please message us in the chat box if you're interested in being either a judge, jury, or I don't want to say executioner, submitter, nominator.
Yeah, the people that killed innovation, brought to you by Futureproofing Next.
And we do have a whole bunch of research ventures too. We launched our emerging 30 technologies earlier this year, and got a lot of press around what was new on the list this year. We are now moving to the customer zeitgeist, and we've just launched what were the top 20 wants and needs of customers, and we're looking for collaborators. So this is the key point here. We're looking for collaborators to actually help author a report with us on this. So please let me know if you want to dive deep into the customer innovation circle. And then later in the year, we'll talk about future of work. I guess that's coming up, and AI. And so these are some of the biggest relevant topics that we're exploring from a future standpoint. And already we're getting some messages about people wanting to be on the jury, which is amazing. And this is our top 20 customer wants. So if you're into customer innovation, if you don't find us, we will find you. We want to have about 12 people that sit on our jury of customer driven innovation people and author a mini report that dives deep into what does the future customer want. And Andrea?
And that, yeah, sure. That brings us to Futureproofing 66 champions. And this is the shameless request that you all become one of these. So listen carefully. We would love to have ongoing relationships with practitioners that are thinking the way we think and challenging the way we think to think differently. We are all thinking all the time about how to have business redefine itself so that it can be relevant. The notion of stakeholder capitalism that we've been talking about, you know, who's entitled to have, to reap the rewards from innovation that occurs? What responsibilities are there to society? How does purpose come into all of this? How do you have a company that inspires people to do absolutely their best human contribution? And these are really deep issues, and we don't feel like we're the only people that think smart about it. So we would love to invite you to be part of what we call Futureproofing 66 Champions. We meet every single month. We are developing a movement, as Sean said. We are hopefully all change agents and innovators and futurists and leaders in the business areas, and well as venture technologists, which are people that understand, you know, this blend between what's happening in machine learning and automation and AI and the new technologies in medicine and engineering that are opening up possibilities for human potential that as never, ever before. And people who like to build ecosystems, people who like to make the connections, and what we call fellow thought leaders. So really what we would love is for you to become one of them. And for people listening, please get in touch with us, futureproofingnext.com/futureproofing66. And that would be a great way for us to stay connected and create this conversation that goes on and continues so that you can challenge us with questions. We can hear more from the field, and we can really inspire ourselves to think better and do more.
And to actually do justice to it too, last month we brought in an author, Soren Nielsen, who is from Denmark, and he had written a book about death by innovation theater. So we're already thinking about the region. My goal on the champions is at least 75 countries of different representation. So I'm looking at a group of 5 countries today that my hope is somebody steps up and says, yeah, I would love to be a representative of our champions. And we've already talked about these salons. I mean, they can take on various forms, but essentially it's brokering what you do well and who your audiences are and what we do well and what our kind of inclinations are, and hopefully turning that into either an executive briefing session or a workshop or some kind of immersion or even a sprint session where, you know, ourselves and maybe a group of colleagues come into your world and actually create, you know, some real progress on the innovation front in 30 weeks or less. And one bonus here, we've landed on kind of an interesting approach that I've just outreached to a whole bunch of the leading AI thinkers in North America. And the moment you mention cocktails and change is the moment people unlock any of their reticence to join something and say, yes, I want to join that. And so I'm opening up the idea that, we have a very intimate session, completely interactive on Zoom. We'll hopefully do it over cocktails, and we don't have more than one person per city. So we'll find the 9 different cities that make the most sense for the Nordic region. We'll bring them all together under the banner of innovation, and we'll explore one topic in detail. So certainly chat with us or message us. hello@futureproofingnext.com is probably the best email, but if you're on live today, just message us in the chat box and mention your city and whether you'd like to be part of this group, and we'll try to organize something for late May. So Andrea, we're reaching the last 2 or 3 minutes of what we wanted to cover off. Any thoughts today?
Well, my message takeaway is it's all about the Nordics. I really honestly think that the connections that we make in the Nordic region can, it's just the world of the future is represented in so many ways in the values and the companies and the innovation that goes on in the Nordics. So we have a lot to learn. And I also think another message takeaway is even as the book comes out and we realize that it's not about the book, it's not about Sean and Andrea. We're over that. It's really about us in a community and us in a movement together with other people. And if COVID has taught me anything from being in lockdown in San Francisco for month after month after month, it's the importance of community, the importance of keeping each other inspired, and this notion of how can we together see differently, learn new things that we don't even know we need to learn, and unlearn things, decide based on some new frameworks of what matters, and commit with our hearts, like our hearts and our sense of urgency. So my message takeaway is I really am looking forward to meeting everybody and hopefully being in a champions group with everyone and learning about what you're doing. And that's my biggest message takeaway. It used to be about our ideas earlier on in this movement. And now every single time I'm in a group like this, I feel like I can't wait to hear what you have to say, people in the Nordic region.
I love people are already sparking to cocktails and change. I'm not too sure if it's driven by our content today, Andrea, or the cocktail side of it, but we'll take either one of those as being a good kind of support for what we're doing. I remember I was in Copenhagen a few years ago, and it was rainy, and I wouldn't have expected that many bicyclists out there, and everybody was on their bike. And I think the metaphor, I might have even uttered it to somebody that was staying with me, was, wow, it's somewhat comforting that there's a place in the world with this many people riding on a bike. And I think if I was to layer that to innovation, it's somewhere comforting in the world that as much as most of the world likes to zig in a certain direction, there is this place called the Nordic region where zags are not only allowed, but oftentimes encouraged. So I love the fact, I've loved all my experiences spending time in the region. Hopefully post-COVID, we'll be able to make it there behind the book, Andrea. But my hope is to deal with a lot more of you in the future as well. So with that in mind, we have, what do we have, Andrea? We do have business models on Clubhouse today, but that's the more immediate thing. I think we will, if anybody's responded on chat today, we will get back to you. And for those that are listening, recorded online, please get in touch with us and go out and get the book when it launches in June. That would be great. So do you want to sign us off, Andrea, or should I?
Well, I'll sign us off. I mean, I'm always excited to see the chat, to kind of virtually meet new people. Hopefully you'll join us in Champions where we can see your face and it's more of a meeting so we can have a conversation. And I love the fact that, Sean's just invented a new trend, this idea of having cocktails. There's a new way to get together for innovation. So I think that also as a former alcohol marketer yourself, Sean, you are the king of understanding how to integrate great cocktails and conversation into conversations about the future. So really, really hoping that we can learn together, be together, and be future proofers together. And we will, as we always say at the end of these things, we will hopefully see everyone in the future.